protective gear for the medical frontline workers that's being found to be non-functional. A lot of countries are angry at the Chinese regime right now. Many countries, the United States very likely frontlining it, are going to launch investigations into this. We know that at the very least, regardless of how the virus got out, intentional or not, lab origin or not, the Chinese regime lied to the world. The Chinese regime censored information. It disappeared or arrested individuals who tried warning the world about it. And very likely you're going to have the Chinese regime get called out on this. It's going to be called out with these investigations. And then right on the heels of that, you're going to have international lawsuits. And of course, there's a question of whether or not you can hold a country liable when it comes to these lawsuits. But what we're going to see very likely are sanctions. You're going to see all the manufacturing getting pulled out of China, of not just the U.S., but many different countries, supply chains pulling out of China from many different countries. And you're going to see what is very likely going to be an economic collapse inside China. And you're going to see a lot of people out of work, very unhappy with the Chinese regime, whose belief in the regime has already faded, who already no longer believe the regime's narratives, who already see through its lies and its propaganda. The Chinese people, they're not stupid. They know they're getting lied to. As if you read what Chinese netizens say about it on a daily basis, it's a joke for them. They joke about it. Now, when it comes to where things are heading internationally, there's going to be a decoupling. The Chinese regime's facade of this friendly veneer, it's all going to fall off. The Chinese people themselves are very likely going to stop supporting it. And we're going to see a few different possibilities. One is a full collapse of the Chinese regime, where very much like the collapse of the Soviet Union, they tried to transition to a different system. That is, of course, dangerous. What we saw with the Soviets was, it collapses. They moved to a free market economy, but who has all the money? It's all the former Communist Party leaders. And of course, they just buy up the natural resources and the businesses and create an oligarchy basically run by the same individuals. Hopefully China will have learned its lesson from that and they will not repeat the same mistake. Maybe they'll find a better way of going forward. Other possibilities, you'll see a balkanization where local governments basically stop listening to the higher levels of the Chinese Communist Party. We're already seeing signs of that where they're not cooperating. They're not listening to higher authorities. When the Chinese, top-level government says implement this policy, they're not listening to it. We've seen a lot of cases like this, and so there is a possibility of balkanization. And I think through these or a combination of these means, within maybe a year, I don't think we're going to have the Chinese Communist Party anymore.
You're saying within a year? That's a bold statement.
Yeah, and I really think that's where it's heading, based on these different trajectories.
A year, you're saying, okay, so here's the other question. How united are we on this belief that you just shared in U.S.? Are Democrats and Republicans on the same page about China today?
It does seem so. China is one of the few bipartisan issues, not just when it comes to, say, the way it's handled this virus. I think with this virus, it's a little complicated because it's being politicized.
No, I think he's pretty positive on his belief. But let me tell you this. The oligarch in the Communist Party will buy up all the resources they can. They'll control all they can. And it will follow the Russian narrative in that area. They may get some breaking up into different groups just telling the Communist Party no, like Eastern Europe did too. But I do not believe that the Chinese Communist Party is going to go away anytime soon. I think they'll have an economic collapse. They'll put a lot of pressure on them. And I think they will have to reform and reshape some of the things they do. But as far as the power, they're not going away. And they may change and soften some of their policies, but it will just be a facade. It will not go away. And I will bet you $100 that in another 2 or 3 years, they may change some of their policies, but the Communist Party is not going away. It may have to reshape and redo some things, but I don't think it will be destroyed. If it is destroyed, it will be destroyed from within, and that will be great. If it happens, What bloodshed will happen, what other things will happen, I don't know. Now, if it's destroyed from within, like he's talking about, that'll be wonderful. But time will tell.
To a degree. A lot of the left, the Democrats, for example, they do want to say Trump mishandled this, and some of the articles you've seen from big media, which do lean left, they've actually been used a lot by the Chinese regime in its propaganda because they're trying to shift blame to the United States, saying the United States did not handle things well and so on. That's one of their big narratives. But really, at the top level, when it comes down to it, it does seem like this is a bipartisan issue. Left and right, Democrats, Republicans, they do seem to be recognizing the Chinese Communist Party for what it is. In fact, there have been some public polls on this asking, people, what do they think of the Chinese Communist Party? What do they think of China's handling of this? And for the most part, it seems people are on the same page, Republicans and Democrats, that they see through it.
That'll be the biggest thing. If we're on the same page, this can happen. But if the media is constantly pinning, saying, no, it's not China's fault, it's U.S.'s fault, no, it's not U.S., China's fault. If we're not united, I don't foresee that taking place, because what helped us, different countries, go through a revolution was a backing from a behemoth country like U.S. to say, yes, we support the revolution. If U.S. doesn't do that, China's not going to go through that process. They will be bullied by the government, I believe so, over and over and over again. By the way, how much have you looked into what happened recently when Yahoo put out the article with this recent doctor, the research on the verge of making very significant coronavirus findings, shot to death? How much have you investigated that so far?
Only a little bit, but I can give some additional insights into that if you'd like.
Please.
Just in terms of the periphery of issues like this. Now, of course, there was this doctor who was allegedly on the front lines of, making some big breakthrough with this virus. I did have some people email me saying they knew this individual. After that came out, I haven't verified it yet. What I've been told is he was working on a vaccine and he was very close to completing that vaccine. That's what I've been told. I haven't fully verified it yet, so take it for what it's worth. It's not clear who the individual was who killed him. It does appear to be someone who knew him. Now, a few different pieces of this. Now, for me, this does bring to mind a few different investigations I've done. For example, there was a case, for example, several years ago now, where there was a murder in Texas of an entire Chinese family. Father, mother, children, all murdered in what appeared to be a very professional hit job. It looked like a professional hit job, basically. They were all executed. There were reports in China that it came out that Zhu Yongkong, the former security czar, called for that murder. That was never verified, but there were reports in China saying that. And at the time, Zhu Yongkong was facing trial through this whole anti-corruption campaign. He was being purged by the top-level leadership. And so it is possible that hits like this can take place. Allegedly, the individual in Texas who was killed was involved in some big oil deal that was going on that Zhu Yongkong was wrapped up in. I did look into that a little bit. He did have a lot of overlap with certain high-level Communist Party figures, including ties to Jiang Zemin, the former head of the Chinese Communist Party, which would have been Zhu Yongkong's political camp, because there are different factions in China. That was never fully verified, but again, there were reports in China about that. A few other cases, just as an example, I never actually talked about this publicly, but in New York, for example, when I was doing a lot of my investigations, one of my sources was a former Chinese spy who actually helped the Chinese regime develop a lot of its overseas, say, overt espionage systems. For example, working with these fraternal organizations, which we call Tongs. He told me about several murders that had taken place. And these murders were allegedly tied to, spy versus spy things among basically Chinese military spies and Chinese government spies infighting on foreign soil, namely, in this case, U.S. soil. And the two of the murders were pretty brutal. One of them was an individual. They tied him to a chair, cut his throat, and then set him on fire. With him, all the evidence was, of course, destroyed. The other individual was a Chinese woman who was killed. The individual who killed her was apparently a boyfriend, and he cut out one of her organs and had it on his person when he was arrested. Now, when I was trying to investigate this, some very strange things came up. Well, one is it ended basically because people I would have needed to interview were dead or gone or would not talk to me. And because, for example, in the fire, evidence was destroyed. But the people who did talk to me told me the same thing. They said that for example, one of the individuals was a spy, a Chinese government spy, and the individual who killed that person was also a Chinese spy. But it was infighting between military spies and government spies. Point being, between these two cases, these people do things like that to each other. If the Zhu Kong case was true, that killing an entire family in Texas, having them killed through a hit job, which was what was alleged in China in some of these reports, that might have been the case. Uh, you do have suicides, sometimes very bizarre suicides, when there are investigations underway into the Chinese regime. For example, when Huawei was first being called out, when this top level Huawei executive was arrested in Canada, for example. You do have things like that where people go and kill themselves, and people do suspect that maybe the foul play was involved.
Yeah, the difference with this is the guy that killed him went in the car and then killed himself. So I don't know if it was
Yeah,
that much of a hit shot, because what hitman kills themselves? That's their business, So
yeah.
whether it was something more, motivation, I don't know what it was. I'm curious to know what comes out of it with where this goes. By the way, final thoughts, I'll give it to you, is what as you're going, this is what you do. Some people wake up in the morning and they're stockbrokers. All they do is study the market. Some people wake up in the morning, they're doctors. All they do is read articles on what's going on with the field they're a part of. Some people wake up in the morning, they're in real estate. They read every article having to do with real estate. What is the latest about what's going on with China right now in regards with U.S. and China?
Well, right now there's a big propaganda battle. This is the big area right now. The United States is, of course, calling for investigations into the Chinese regime, conducting investigations. There are international calls, Europe, different countries in the EU, UK, Australia, Canada. I mean, you name it, they're calling for investigations. And the Chinese regime is trying to challenge those investigations through threats, through diplomatic threats. They're trying to challenge those investigations through financial threats. They're trying to challenge those investigations, especially through this new propaganda push, where they're trying to shift blame and say the United States did not handle its response to the virus well. And they're trying to say the Chinese regime was being responsible, held off the virus for 2 months while the rest of the world could prepare for it. And of course, that's very easily debunked. The Chinese regime was, lying to the world about the severity of it, was lying to the world about human-to-human transmission, covered up the fact that there was human-to-human transmission even when they knew it was the case. And then in the meantime, before they alerted the world, went and had, actually through the United Front, matter of fact, there were some reports in Canada saying the United Front was involved in this, had all their foreign, networks go and buy up all the PPE, this protective gear, before they told the world about it. And so they were able to corner the entire global market on these protective medical gear. This is where it's at, this narrative battle. And they've already pretty much lost the narrative battle, it seems.
It's going to be very interesting what happens next. Obviously, everybody's following very closely. How can people find you, Joshua?
They can find my show, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, on YouTube. They can also go to theepochtimes.com, TheEpochTimes.com.
We're going to put his links below. By the way, if you search him as Joshua Phillip with 2 P's, 1 L, 2 P's, 1 L, just keep that part in mind when you're searching him. Joshua, again, thank you so much for making the time to be a guest on Valuetainment.
Hey,
All right, so pretty powerful. Now, closing comments. I believe the Chinese Party is doing all that and more in their country and outside their country. Historically, when you're fighting battles internally and you're fighting battles externally, the most important battle is internally, historically. If the Chinese people get enough pressure put on them and lose enough jobs and lose enough lives, their Chinese Communist Party is in trouble. They'll have to change. And I believe it will change like it did in Russia to some extent. The real question in my mind is how much? Chinese Communist Party is, I believe, tougher and more severe than the Russian Party, but only time will tell. But if this does happen, within several years, 3, 4, 5 years, it will be a game changer worldwide. You'll see things happen in China that you've never expected before. So we're living in very exciting times and tough times for China. We'll see what happens. The best scenario is that it will happen in 2 to 5 years. You'll see some major changes happen. A worse scenario is you'll see some minor changes happen and a lot more bloody battles going on. But the internal strife really squelched through the hammer of the Communist Party. We'll see. I think the biggest threat is not internal problems, but if you start seeing people fracture, major leaders fracture or challenge the major leaders in the Communist Party with internal strife, it will go down a lot quicker than I expect. So only time will tell what's going to happen in China. But they're going to go through some major challenges here in the next 3 to 5 years, 3 to 7 years, for sure. Hopefully it will follow Russia and it will be a great benefit for the world to see the Communist Party soften or be destroyed or taken over by a more conservative, democratic or socialistic party with more openings for finance, money, policy, and other things. It'll be interesting to see what happens. This is Roger Martin from Village Montana.